Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you guys?
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, how was finals week?
Oh, it's good. I mean, I'm on spring break now. But it feels nice to kind of move ahead. It's weird because everything's gone really well in most ways for the program, but there's a certain something is standing out quite a bit in terms of how it's being done and executed with one of the courses. So it's weird. It's almost comical, but I'll talk more about that some other time. But I mean, I'm okay. I'm slightly under the weather, but I'll be fine here today just because I'm a little stomach issue. But I'm all right. I'm ready to kind of go on with this and continue where things are going. And there's a lot of figuring out what the summer is going to entail. I actually might take. I've usually been taking two courses a term, a quarter, I guess. But I might take three next term. But we'll see because it's a busy summer. But I found someone who is doing some stuff I might want to like follow up with. I wonder if I can easily show his stuff. I don't think anyone here has heard of him, but he's someone of faculty that I'll just briefly mention as a curious person. But David Danks, his research is interesting. I might try to take a course with him, but he's sort of doing, does a lot of stuff. Philosophers, technologists, scientists, and policymakers. Causality. I wish I could have went to the causality workshop, but I don't think it's going to work out for me to go there. Philosophical puzzles, computational cognitive science. So I mean, I might try to work with that person, or take his course, but we'll see. The course itself is on data ethics, which is an important topic. That wasn't what I was going to focus on necessarily, so we'll see. But then I really mentioned summer because Google Summer Code stuff is basically, it's going to be here soon. And April's here, and everything else is sort of rushing ahead. I heard back from the Santa Fe Institute, and I'm not going to go to that summer school, but I'm still waiting to hear back from like Dizzy and a few other places too. So we'll see. But that's generally where I'm at. Yeah, so I think we left off on, we're reading the Yogi paper, Johannes Jaeger paper, on this agency and cognition are fundamentally not computational. And we spent a lot of time covering his framing of, I'm not going to let me scroll back. Last week we kind of had a two-part meeting where Amanda and Bradley kind of swapped in and out. But we're all basically around the same point here. We spent a lot of time going through the framing of stuff, and we're kind of ready to move on to, what is he actually asserting? So I don't know if you want to take the lead on that, Amanda, or direct us to a point in the text that you wanted to start with. Yeah, that's what we're kind of just putting notes here. Okay, so you wanted to start at 4.
Yeah, there might be, I don't know, unless anyone has comments on stuff before that left over from last week.
We had the scissors picture we to talk about at some point. I don't think so. I meant he seemed like he's just going into further, like, okay, there he talks about binary rationality. It talks about relevance and the nature of finding relevance or purpose. I'm happy to kind of just go here if we can go back if we need to. And I know you have notes here, so if you want to go to any here, just you know.
I think I made I did make a section titled theory that has a lot of green highlights. Yeah.
Okay, so we're here. Did you want to just go through this, or did you want to mention anything specific? I can just read through it.
Well, I do have a thought on just that first paragraph that I can start with, and it's what I wrote down. So he says that basic natural agency comes from, quote, the peculiar self-referential and hierarchical causal regime that underlies the organization of living matter. And then he cites a whole bunch of people, which I thought was cool. A lot of those names, the names there that stood out to me are like big names and have very different, like support maybe different versions of that claim. So that's definitely a list of citations to check out. But so yeah, he says that's what gives rise to natural agency. And one question I had in response to that is like, how peculiar is this structure? Is this hierarchical causal regime? How like individual is it? How universal is it? Like, can you have a taxonomy of what? Can you have different descriptions of like different versions of this structure that could help distinguish between, for example, maybe plants versus animals, an organism versus an ecology, or even like different, just like different individual humans. Can we describe those differences in terms of differences in this structure? Because it seems like that would lead to different versions of agency.
Yeah, and I think that kind of comes to the, I don't know, the trouble with assigning purpose, in general, because like there's no with the cancer, you know, it's clearly making a bad life choice according to the person to the organism that wants to live in general, but if you're on the cancer side of things, is it different, or what is deranged and how would you decide derangement, and I think that's cancer's I'm sure there's very specific ways to think about it in terms of like genetic mutations and the generation of something according to either a DNA plan or whatnot. Although there's intention there, but I think that'd be really like areas where this is tricky for me have to do with what about in terms of a more human and diverse way of interacting with information or interacting with environments or having different yes, neurodiversity or just personality differences. Like is someone being deranged or are they just being a different I'll put some questions here, I guess.
Right, like I guess in the first part I was thinking like what are some neutral variations in whatever this structure is supposed to be. But then it's a second question, like, can there be objectively better and worse versions of it? And the reason I noted cancer there is because of the way Levin talks about it as like, like a failure of certain cells to kind of be a part of the organism. That seems like if there's ever a case of an objectively like deranged agency in cells like that, or agency in the organism. I don't know the best way to articulate that, but that seems like right, not just the normal divergence in cellular functioning. It's like something's gone wrong.
To to blow this up for 1 second, and I want to not, or I want to quickly go away from this after I say it. Like, I think that's, I don't know. I really need to find out what Levin's saying about this because I'd be curious to hear what he says about it. But like in this supremely data and scientific driven era that we're in, I'm really wondering, you know, what where is the space for sort of making that choice? Like, it's kind of, I'll say easy in big air quotes to say yes, cancer is an obvious first example of here's what these cell clusters are kind of supposed to do, and here's what they don't do, and then there's a sort of a potentially catastrophic, outcome. And how does that translate to other things, um, and behaviors and actions and models of being? And I think we're sort of to make a hot take that I don't necessarily ascribe to 100%, but just to present it. I think we're in a point in time in sort of a lot of spaces in academia or otherwise, like governance and such. Like, we are not ready to really use a sort of normative guideline of any nature to really to effectively say we need to do this and not that. And I wonder, um, what 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 that will be, in some other senses. Anyway, I will quickly distance myself from that and say let's move on to these other things. Um, and yeah, this is a pretty interesting list. You have all the way Rosen, Piaget, Varela, Maturana.
Poirero, I've read and mentioned before.
Oh, is that the person the dance person? No.
No, Dynamics of Acting is her book. She's primarily
Yeah,
of
that's
action.
right. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Peculiar organization. Um, yeah. Okay. Is both the source and the outcome of the capacity of a living cell or multicellular organism to self manufacture. Life is what it does.
That self-manufacture citation I shared to the
Yes.
Slack because it looked interesting. It was also funny that there's like dozens of citations for the previous bit, and then just one here for what seems like a I don't know, just as important idea. Like there was one guy who's written about this.
It must pass this integrated functional organization on to future generations to produce some form of reliably but perfect heredity. Okay. This process is encapsulated by the concept of autopoiesis, which emphasizes the core of a living system to self-produce and maintain its own boundaries. What we have here? Emerged at the origin of life and is therefore shared among all organisms. Okay. As far as anyone knows, this kind of organization is unique to organisms. And he's differentiating this between natural occurrences or natural, not quote unquote non-living systems. Okay. Two aspects of biological organization are particularly important here. First, functional organization is the same as physical structure. And then the second, at the heart of contemporary accounts of biological organization lies the concept of organizational closure, which is a peculiar, this word of choice apparently, a relational pattern of collective dependence between functional components of a living system. Each component must be generated by and must in turn generate at least one other component process within the same organization. This means that individual components would not operate or even exist without each other. Let us illustrate this central concept using two contemporary approaches. And you have some more highlights here for that, it looks like. So this is for organizational closure. One useful way to think about biological organization is to separate underlying process into or physiochemical flows from higher level constraints. Constraints through the interactions between component processes make up living systems. Underlying flows, like the underlying flows, they are dynamic but change at different time scales. Constraints can thus be formally described as boundary conditions imposed upon the underlying dynamics. An enzyme is a good example of a constraint. It alters the kinetics of biochemical reaction without itself being altered in the process. We can now conceptualize organization closure as the closure of constraints. I'm not sure I know these folks at all. The organism level pattern of constraints restricts the channels dynamics of the underlying process such a way that preserve overall patterns of constraints. Evidently, it's causally circular in the form of self-constraint. In this way, organization is the system that becomes its own relative stability. Okay, here we are, this next one. Yeah. Organizational closure requires thermodynamic openness. It occurs only in physical systems that operate far from equilibrium. The basic reason for this is that organisms must constantly produce work by harvesting some entropy gradient in its own environment to regenerate, repair, and replenish its own constraints. Deacon and Kaufman. This leads to organizational continuity. And he continues with the enzyme example.
I can't remember the first place that I heard the phrase openness from closure, but I had mentioned that previously, and then this is exactly what I had in mind. Like that the closure that is described there is like what allows an organism to exist. And it's like what allows the organism to be separate and thus like open to its environment.
This is going to be a note for myself.
Definitely related to the order from noise idea, like taking the box of magnets and then arranging themselves.
Yeah, I think this is. I don't recall Fuchs going into this directly, but it seems related to some of the, like, it seems like it would be a kind of adjacent thing to what Fuchs was getting at with his the causalities, and he was trying to eat, well, in his theory, I guess. But this is sort of, in another as a slate. There was a discussion in another group that I'm in today about, different like Jeff Hinton and his sort of evolving takes on is our LLMs consciousness as AI consciousness, whatever. And um, interesting in this way because this is sort of it's almost like in what was just said, it's almost like certain things, certain forms of, and I guess I assume this is where I don't know if he goes any further into differentiating himself from the like Yogi spent a lot of time earlier in the text saying what he's against in terms of, um, these other computational views. And it is essentially, can we say that he's against, I don't know if he says it below or not directly, but can we say basically that he's, against um this computationally because there's no mm, he's trying to he's saying organizational closure and it's sort of relation to this constant needing something from the environment, and it's sort of this internal structure that's built relative to the harvesting entropy, some entropy gradient in its environment to regenerate, repair, and replenish itself, and that's I guess I'm kind of reverse coming back up through saying that, so this is what he's getting at in terms of this is cognition and this is biological experience, and machines can't do this. Right? Is there is no continuity in these sort of isolated programmatical processes. Um,
Right. And the um like the organism, the my impression, although he doesn't say it explicitly here, is like the way that the organism harvests entropy from its, or harvests the energy from the entropy gradient. Like that process can be modified. There's like a flexibility in all of this. Like the organism's organization can be flexible and be like self-determined in virtue of being self-referential, and that part's also missing from AI. And it's not even clear how you would try to create that because of what you said, because it's so everything's fixed.
mm, the small world as Savage, not Macho Man Randy Savage, but Jimmy Savage said, um, which I remember from my earlier post about. Okay, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's something like, regardless of, I'm not sure what to make of a lot of this stuff yet. I'm like, as usual, I sort of differentiate hot takes versus what to actually feel about this stuff. But I think there's a very interesting point being made here, and I don't know what to really do with the point being made. Like, there's something to the continuity, the harvesting some gradient, entropy gradient, this the self constraint, the closure of constraint, self constraint, organizational continuity. I think I like what that is. I just don't know what it does yet. In my personal like sense of things. But I'm really glad to see this argument. I think this argument is one I want to know, and I'm glad. Like, I'm curious if he does go more into um, like metabolism and things like this here. Uh, metabolic flow can and it must change adaptively in response to environmental conditions and the internal requirements of the organism. But if it ceases to repair and replenish the organism dies. Okay. Um, okay, this is further down. Okay, we didn't. I don't want to miss this Aristotelian final cause here. I don't think I'm there yet. Don't leave past that. So Robert Rosen's relational theory about metabolism repair, um, and its recent refinement into fabrication assembly systems.
I would love to spend time on this, on Rosen in general, but in particular this metabolism repair. Maybe that can be a theme of the next few readings, because this has been on my to-do list for a while, my to-read list. So we don't have to rush to it, but I'd be very happy.
Oh yeah, I'm up for that too. There's something that came up in the earlier discussion that I mentioned too about maybe Bradley would know this because it's a newer computational thing. I want to say like drag LLMs, but like LLMs that are, I forget what the word that they use. Someone is much more into machine learning than I am used it today.
Drag LLMs or what do they do? Like I've not heard of that.
It was about it was a later like more recent development in LLMs that are sort of recursive more in a certain way. I can't remember the acronym, but it reminded me a little bit of something here. But I'm gonna have to find it before I can talk about it because I can't. It was like a reference of a reference or something that the person mentioned. I had no idea what it was, so I'll try to find it and say more. Sorry. But yes, Amanda, you wanted to look more at this stuff, and I think that would be good to do too. Biological organization refers to the explanatory context of Aristotle's four causes, or Asia, I believe. Go beyond our restricted sense of causality. They correspond in different ways of asking why questions about some natural phenomenon. And as an example, take a marble sculpture. It's a material cause, is that a marble is made of its formal cause is what makes the sculpture of Aristotle. Its efficient cause is the sculpture wielding the tools, and its final cause is the sculpture's attention to make the statue. Using this meta-mathematical framework of category theory, Rosen constructs a rigorous formal framework that distinguishes material causes, flows, from their processors, which are the efficient causes generating particular dynamics that characterize living systems. Thinking of enzymes again is possible to examples of efficient cause. We see the distinction in similar spirit, but not equivalent to the separation of processes and constraints above. So essential insight is that MR system models are open to material and energy flows, but closed to efficient causation. And this is a form of organizational closure, meaning each processor has an efficient cause, another processor within the organizational system. Hierarchical cycle of efficient causation, imminent causation, which is more than mere cybernetic feedback, latter being restricted to material causes, hierarchically flat, and generating material flows. Okay. Hierarchical cycles, in contrast, consist of nested, interacting processes that preserve their own pattern of interrelations over multiple scales of time and space. And so we get to this figure here below too, between this multi-level relationship between metabolism and macromolecular biosynthesis, internal milieu, and regulated permeability, self-manufacturing capabilities. I don't know if you want to talk about this image at all.
Going back to that that last line, that definitely seems like where you can generate examples of things going wrong, like objectively wrong. Um, so like when there's some uh, flaw in this circular multi-level relationship, when there's some like uh, I don't know, positive runaway positive feedback loop that's leading to like disease. Um, that's just interesting because it seems like it allows a cybernetic like systems level description of disease, which right now much of the best explanations we have are like, oh, this molecule is deficient. And it seems like maybe there's a better style of explanation, and maybe a better like taxonomy of diseases based off of this way of thinking.
Well,
And
it's
it
interesting.
was an interesting case study. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I'll say something afterwards as a total. It's a tangent. But did you want to say more about that?
No, all I said was like cancer is is the example that's standing out.
Yeah, I saw someone, and I don't know how to feel about this yet. I just saw a little bit on someone saying they made a comorbidity and neurodivergence connection between various comorbidities and certain like actual um like ways things are functioning, and they have a big connection between uh something like, I forget, it was bacterial based or some otherwise thing, but someone was essentially trying to make a very grand map of how certain neurodivergence or uh, I, I don't know if it's fair to say mental illnesses, but were happening based off of this big map that they're trying to put together, and I wonder how much they're trying to get at what we're saying here. It feels a little I don't trust it yet, and I haven't looked at like the actual paper, but we'll something to come back to.
Yeah, that's interesting.
To be unfair to the person, it was an interesting example of how someone could, like, there's just this formula out there now that's sort of a space between advocacy and like public science and public outreach and science communication, where you can, whatever your agenda is, almost like whatever your agenda or purpose, to be slightly ironic, you can just create a lot of material and convincing sounding arguments, and create you can just create a platform out of thin air. Whether or not it's good, or valuable or misleading is another story. But the ability to just create platforms of ideas is kind of impressive and potentially scary. So yeah, I guess I don't know if we want to talk about this figure, but no, we're not here yet. I don't think I missed this quote yet, but let me know. So this figure.
I thought the illustrations were cute, but I didn't find them particularly helpful. At least not these little spirals.
I like the implicit like 3-point yin yang here.
Yeah.
But it doesn't quite. I don't know what to make of it here yet. But yes, they are cutely made. Biological organization is intrinsically and unavoidably teleological in a specific and well-defined sense. We'll discuss the wider consequences about that ahead in the conclusions. For now, let us simply assure the reader that it leads to none of the difficulties usually associated with a teleological explanation, as argued by this fellow. Hofmeyr, the person that Amanda put in the Slack, I believe, extends Rosen's mathematical methodology in a number of crucial aspects. Yes, with this tool in hand, we can extend Rosen's framework and map it explicitly onto the cellular process involved in self-manufacture. self-manufacture. Intermediate metabolism, biosynthesis, yes, we talked about those. Resulting model is fabrication assembly system. Okay. And he goes into these systems here a bit more. I don't know if we want to spend a lot of time on the systems or move to other things.
I think we can skip it.
Heritable variability into Rosen's formal systems. Okay.
I thought it was interesting, but maybe not relevant to the biggest picture.
Jaeger 2024b. This is perhaps why it's so. This is interesting here. If it was already clear before, if it wasn't already clear before, biological organizations irreducible system level property. This is why it's so difficult to study with purely reductionist analytical approaches, which sounds like very much a Yogi Johannes Jaeger. I think that's his like on brand, very on brand. As it's said
Physics
now.
NP.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Open to formal causation, right? Closed to efficient causes, but open to formal causation. Okay. Over this in topic 6, section 6. To the overall. To the overall closure of systems. Okay. This leads to an apparent paradox. Without these processes being present at the same time, already interacting with each other, none of them can ever become active in the first place. To compare and contrast with Turing's halting problem, Hofmeier calls this kind of deadlock the starting problem in biological systems. Mm-hmm. So, with this in mind, he wants to revisit these living and non-living systems. Oops. 1 second, actually. I have to check something else. Nope. Okay, sorry. Oops. Okay. Okay. Rosen. Complex systems include living cells and organisms. Okay. Based on this distinction, Robert delivers his most famous conjecture. He shows in a mathematically rigorous manner that only simple systems can be captured by completely analytical or algorithmic models, small world stuff, while any characterization of complex systems in terms of computation must necessarily remain incomplete.
That's really interesting. I do want to. I probably wouldn't understand the mathematically rigorous proof of this, but that is very interesting.
I think this sounds like it's kind of getting close to some of the like incompleteness stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Rosen's like ours is an incompleteness argument analogous to Gödel's proof of mathematics. It says it may well be possible to approximate, but it will never capture the full range of dynamic behaviors of a listing of a completely. Okay. If true, this implies the strong Church-Turing conjecture or principle claiming that all physical processes in nature must be computable is false. Yeah, I suppose. I'm just going to take this whole paragraph and put it in here. Okay. So here we extend and recontextualize his conjecture, make an even stronger claim. It no longer makes sense to ask if organisms are computable if they are not formalizable in the first place. So I guess I can understand why he was so antagonistic to Levin's other paper, which is saying, "Hey, maybe the boundaries are blurring more this way." He's saying, "No, it's not even possible in this sense of you can't even formalize them. So how could you say it's computation?" Uh, our argument is about deeper limitations and explanation. I'm pretty sure I might have said this last time, but I think a few times in um, the Bernstein workshop where he was at, he basically said he kind of made an interesting point, which is saying, well, if we don't understand this system as a biological system, but now we're going to talk about a computational system we don't understand, is that actually any better? Are we doing anything by saying by transfer by making that, or are we just sort of fooling ourselves in that process? Which okay, you um, intrinsic goals, self-determination, autonomous. In other words, it becomes autonomous according to these, because ultimately the process of maintaining closure must be internally driven. Even though the environment is a necessary condition for existence, not just as a food source, an energy source, an organism does not behave in a purely reactive manner with regard to external pursuits. Instead, future states of the system are dynamically presupposed by its own inherent organization at earlier points in time. This is exactly what we mean when we say organism is its own final cause. No. Okay. If organizational continuity ceases, the organism dies and no longer is a living system. It still engages with the environment by getting colonized by saprophages, but the inner cause, the inner source of its aliveness is gone. According to Rosen, is made transition from complex to simple. Complexity therefore originates from within. And it remains opaque to any external observer forever beyond full formalization. Actually, and what's this? He's saying, where's the 10? His reference here? I don't see it. But there's a footnote for something here. And it says, the situation is a bit more subtle than that, as argued by Egbert. Using minimalistic metabolism model of self-manufacturing agency, they showed the difference between dynamic regimes of being metastably alive and being dead. There's a precarious zone in which the system is slowly dying, but still alive for a limited amount of time. Okay. So we're almost done with this section. Taken together, all this says basic natural agency is characterized by the ability to define and attain primary principal goals of living beings to keep themselves alive. Okay, sure. What we need to look at next is another important dimension of an organism's behavior, its agent-arena relations, which are guided by a kind of interactive autonomy. A full-blown account of natural agency requires both organizational and ecological dimension, so later will be the topic of the next two sections. Okay, so now we're at 5. I'm guessing these are from 5, but I don't know if you want to step in and say anything about this or what's ahead. And I kind of went through everything kind of slowly, but we can move. If you want to point me to a direction, you can.
No, we can just keep going. I didn't finish reviewing these notes, so I can't remember how far down they are. But real quick, another person who I would be interested in reading for the group is last name Beer. He's come up a few times.
Stanford, the other Beer.
Randall Beer.
Randall Beer.
I want to say Randall. The one that has a paper on precariousness.
Oh, so, I want to put that in the Slack too.
And I know about the paper from somewhere in this group, so maybe we've gone over it on a Saturday before.
And what's the one we wanted to look at also? We mentioned, was it Rosen stuff or someone else's?
Rosen's, yeah, Rosen's.
Okay, Rosen's work on,
Metabolism.
okay, just so we can come back to that. Okay, so number 5 is a number after number 4. And it's basic biological anticipation. And he's talking about these sort of natural agency in the broader sense of the arena of the organism. The interactive dimension of natural agency is also called adaptive agency because it's concerned with how organism, once it has achieved basic self-manufacture, can adaptively regulate to its state in response to its environment. As an example, consider the paramecium again. Alicea is a consequence of metabolism and maintenance of internal milieu. Okay. Thus, constrained subject to closure must exert effects on the boundaries of the organism. Agency is not only organizational but also ecological phenomenon. Yes. Okay. Yes, the organism must be able to pursue the goal that it's set. Such pursuits presupposes 2 things. First, the organism must be motivated, which it maybe stems from its fragility and mortality. If a system cannot perish, or at least suffer strain or damage, it has no reason to act. This is why the execution of an algorithm must be triggered by an external agent. It pursues nothing on its own. I mentioned Sutton and Bartow here for the footnote. Relies on machines wanting in the sense of doling out rewards and punishment. In stark contrast, the intrinsic motivation of organism must ultimately be rooted in the continuous drive to persist in a challenging environment. The tedium and futility of any kind of true immortality is philosophically pondered in Bernard Williams' classic essay, the Macropolus case, which I do not know of.
No, I've never heard of it.
Secondly, and more importantly, the organism must be able to identify appropriate combination of sequences of actions suitable for strategies that increase the likeliness of attaining goals. This is what makes the right choice. To select an appropriate action strategy from one's repertoire that satisfies the situation. The chosen path may not be optimal, nothing ever is, but making adequate choices still requires the ability to assess the potential consequences of actions. More precisely, it means that even the simplest organism must have the capacity to project the present state of the world into the future, or perhaps more appropriately, to pull the future back into the present. Or, simply put, apparently, any purposive system is able to perform an activity rather than another because of its likely consequences. Recall that this cannot rely on intention or awareness if we are to develop the account of relevance realization suitable for all living beings. Therefore, it's our next task to show that even the most primitive organisms are anticipatory systems, citing Rosen and Louis. One thing here. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left.
The free energy principle is mentioned at the bottom in the footnote.
Oh, you wanted to see this footnote here?
I just didn't catch it the first time, and it's interesting that the free energy principle is mentioned.
What is this cited here? I don't see where the 12 is. Do you?
No.
Here it is. Okay. Anticipatory system possesses internal predictive models of itself. Yes. These models may not be explicit representations, because we don't want to go there. They simply stand for expectations in some generic way. Interesting. I'm gonna get this here. Those generic expectations. Often they manifest as evolved automatisms or habituated instinctive behaviors, selectors of action inherited from ancestors that attain their goals to survive and later reproduce in comparable circumstances in the past. I think what comes to my mind here, and I wonder if it fits, is sort of one of my, I guess, friend colleagues one time said, "Man, I wonder how many, like, what is thinking about cats and how they walk in their own footprints, and saying some comment about how many times, like, I don't know if it was as like gruesome as like how many cats died because they didn't walk in their own footprints, but something of that nature of like why, as a habituated instinctive behavior, did that happen? There's obviously reasons and whatever else, but I guess maybe that's an expectation or a preference that was groomed
Hmm.
in this context.
There's
Only
like
exception.
the-
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just hypothesizing about why cats would do that. But maybe whatever instinct they have to do that is like a spin-off of some instinct that was like clearly selected for it. Like if you're trying to think of a natural selection kind of
Mhm.
explanation for it, it's maybe an instance of something more general. I don't know what that would be, but maybe a more general cognitive tendency that makes you better fit for the environment. I still don't know if like natural selection is a necessary part of the explanation for that.
Right.
That's interesting.
I'm gonna write this about the cats. I feel like a lot of my best analogies have to do with cats for some reason. Um, because like, I've been more familiar with them than dogs. I had both, but I feel like I've seen cats like cognitively develop more. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's something there that's interesting. And he goes into only exceptionally in small sets of highly complex animals. Okay, we're going to get to the footnote here. Comparable circles of the past. So this is where he calls upon, he invokes an alternative explanation can be provided in terms of the free energy principles, and not studying person, which defines a set of minimal principles of organization in terms of minimizing free energy to seek out the path of least resistance. This can be interpreted as simple instantiation of anticipatory behavior. However, this explanation remains embedded in algorithmic small world framework. So he's criticizing the free energy principle here a bit, saying it doesn't apply because of it's too small world. Which I guess we'll get to in the conclusions. Okay. Only exceptionally in a small set of highly complex animals, including humans, can we speak of representations or even premeditated mental simulations for further events. Most internal predictive models are simpler yet anticipatory. Let us examine these minimal requirements. To start with an example, we talk about bacterium. Can only modify frequency of its change in its flagellar motion to swim up a nutrient gradient, or conversely avoid the presence of a toxin, almost like simple brain vehicles. This evolved automatism anticipates some outcomes of the bacterium's action in a few ways, and it directs the bacterium's movements towards beneficial outcomes. This process can and does go wrong. Okay. It's important to repeat that there's nothing in the bacterium explicitly tends to do, nor is it any way aware of what it's doing. or how it selects the appropriate action. Its responses are evolved habits in the sense that there are a few alternative paths of action. There's very little flexibility in behavior. And there's certainly no self-reflection. Interesting. I think, yeah, given that we have 3 minutes left, I'll probably stop here and just ramble about this for a bit because I feel like, one, I think maybe an interesting way to think about what Rosen stuff is getting at, or not Rosen, what Yogi's getting at here is I don't know how to square like the concept of affordances, which I think is I don't think he's used that word at all here. And I have to imagine he's avoiding using the word affordances at this point, right? Like, has he said it at all? I don't think so.
No, but I feel like you might as well have with like
Okay.
arena.
It's come up. It's come up a few times. Oh, it's the next section.
Oh, great.
Well, okay. I stand a little corrected then. But he's only mentioned it 2 times before, so I feel a little justified in the fact that it was only way in the start of things. All right. So, to be continued on that front, what I was basically going to say is I think there's something to alternative passive action. Like, I think there's something between that and one of my favorite Norbert Wiener quotes about how the transmission of information is impossible save for as a transmission of alternatives. Like, I think there's something there, but I feel like, like, it's a little dealer's choice a bit, and like, do you saying that's okay, boom, that's inherently computational, or are you saying, well, we're just choosing the organism is exerting some agency, even there's no self-reflection in this case, about choosing paths of action. And these paths are based off of non-computational, non-representational, options that have expectations and preferences, right? And it's quite interesting to me because I think there's an unsaid there's something unsaid here too that isn't like kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. But just trying to write this down coherently. Numbers alternatives, but also what was I going to say after writing this out? And like, what sort of my last comment on this weird nebulous train is I'm going to invoke a Michael Levin comment, and he was asked about like essentially is that sort of like about personality types and people like you when you're getting archetypes or whatever. And he didn't dismiss it. He was talking a bit to someone, talking about like pre like non-neuronal, like pre-neuronal just electrical wiring, like way back in the day. Like how could that be related to personality differences at the time in one of the videos, one of his discussions. Probably with someone a little more like far out than conventionally academic, I don't remember. But why I'm mentioning that here is that I think there's something to be considered that even if we're saying, okay, there's certainly no self-reflection here in this bacteria, where is there sort of emergence of, I don't want to say personality, but what point do habits become differentiable, like either between, I don't want to say even like phenotypically necessarily, but like at what point are there, at what point, how is all this stuff, if he's saying this as examples, like humans are these fancy examples of highly complicated things, at one point does sort of, I guess I'm going to use the word personality here, emerge in the sense of there being different ways for the same genetic organisms to operate in their niche spaces, and like what is that? Is I'm curious if he's going to address that at all, or if like Rosen talks about it. I don't know anything about what he says, because there's something there that I'm curious about. But I know we're over, so.
Well, that last question kind of sounds like my first question, a version of it. Like,
oh yeah,
what are how individual is this versus how universal is this source of natural agency, this structure of, I forget the words he used, the organization of parts. Like how, yeah, basically what variations exist with that within the group of things that are still agents.
Yeah, I'll have to think about how to word my stuff better. At any rate, we're at the hour. Any other things we want to say before we conclude for this? We're almost at sort of 6, which is about affordance, which is the word we was worrying about. So. Okay, I guess we'll pick up here next time. So on page 24, and go from there.
Sounds good.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you soon.